السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
حياكم الله.
الله يحييك.
طيب, let's begin this class. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. This is class number 9 of ITKI 6102, Ijtihad, Renewal, and Modernity. And it is the 10th of December 2022, Saturday. And this is the October to December 2022 trimester for the IKI Academy, Institute of Knowledge Integration. And I'm your instructor, Omar Altalib. It is my pleasure and honor to be with you to share ideas and to discuss a variety of topics regarding Ijtihad, Renewal, and contemporary Islamic thought. May Allah bless all of you for attending, and we hope for a productive and engaging discussion, inshallah. Let me just remind everybody that there will be an upcoming assignment number 4, and that will be the last assignment for this course. It's a total of 4 assignments, which will constitute 40% of your grade. Can everybody hear me? You can hear me, yes?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear too.
Very good. Okay. Omida Khan, if you still have technical difficulties, why don't you log out and then log back in, inshallah. So, in addition to the 4 assignments, there's the attendance grade of 10%, and then finally the research paper. Please, between now and next class, send me a draft copy of your research paper, whatever you have done, no matter how little. Just send it to me to my email, and then the final draft of the research paper, the final version, will be due on the last day of class, which is going to be, inshallah, on 31 December, which is the 12th class, bi'idhnillah. So I hope everybody has been able to make progress. If you haven't, please contact me right away, and we will discuss what is needed. Any question? Everybody can hear me, right? Umida Khan is saying there's a problem with her microphone, but so far all of you can hear me, right? Oh, Natalie, you cannot hear either. I see. SubhanAllah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
You can hear me, Brother Omar?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Brother Muhammad, you can hear me. Brother Rafiq, you can hear me.
Yes, it's clear.
So it's just Natalie.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Natalie and Umida Khan, I'm sorry for the technical difficulty, but why don't you log out and then try to log back in, and we'll see if that will address the issue. But thank you for letting me know. We want to make sure that everybody can hear clearly and be able to benefit from this class. So please log out, Natalie and Umida Khan, because the others can hear me. Let me just put that in a note. Everyone can hear except Natalie and Umida Khan. So I'll tell them Natalie and Umida Khan, please log out and then log back in. Okay, I hope this solves the problem, inshallah. Okay, so Natalie and Umida Khan understood the message. Very good. Okay, before we continue, let me just give you a minute so that we can see. Okay, Umida Khan, you have joined. Can you hear this time? Are you able to hear Umida Khan? Let me ask her in the text. Umida Khan, can you hear? Natalie is back, so let's ask Natalie as well. Natalie, can you hear? No. Umida Khan, you cannot hear. Let's see. Oh, Natalie cannot hear. Okay. Then let me do this. Oh, Natalie can hear now. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So now we just are waiting for Umida Khan. So Umida Khan, I don't know what to say. Yes. Okay, Umida Khan has left. And then hopefully the next time it will work. Subhanallah. Again, we are dealing with technology. Technology is supposed to serve us, but sometimes it doesn't. As with anything human-made, it will not always be perfect. And we hope for success, inshallah. Umida Khan, okay, you are back. What about this time, Umida Khan? Let's try Umida Khan. Can you hear? Let's see what's happening. Okay, so far everybody can hear. Oh, no. La ilaha illallah. I don't know what to tell you, Sister Umida Khan, except if you can try to log in from a different device. I don't know if that is possible, but let's see if you can do that, and then maybe that will address the issue. Otherwise, I don't know what else to tell you, because every time you have logged in the past, there has not been any issue. I don't know if it has anything to do with your internet, or maybe the problem is from my end. We hope. Okay, good, very good. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, anybody with any questions, please ask, especially about the assignments and the paper. And we have only this month left together, which is the last month of our trimester. And so far, I have had a wonderful journey with all of you. I have benefited tremendously, and I hope to continue to benefit, and for all of us to benefit in our last classes. We have this class, which is class number 9, and then 3 more classes, and then the trimester will be over. So in these classes, beginning with this one, I want to address a number of issues. One is to remind everybody that we are dealing with Ijtihad. Ijtihad meaning independent reasoning, and at the same time there's something called taqleed, which is imitation or conforming to legal precedent. So the debate between coming up with innovative and new solutions to problems Muslims face has been dealt with a lot by many scholars, as opposed to taqleed, which is also supported by many scholars, simply following decisions and fatwas and declarations made by previous scholars. In this class, we are trying to point out the benefits of Ijtihad. It's not perfect. It is subject to error, but at least it's one way to help us to deal with the issues we are facing, especially those that deal with the modern world, the world we are living in, and modernity, the ideas that are dominant in our world today, such as change is a good thing, such as everything can be rethought, whether it's the family structure or the way governments behave, or new economic dealings such as cryptocurrency. All of these are part of modernity and the ideas surrounding modernity. Yes, Sister Amira Khan, let me mention to her, it is okay if you watch the recording. Okay. Now, so we go back to the problem. If you remember, I mentioned in the very first class, for those of you who were there, that I like to address issues in terms of the question, the fundamental question, the basic question, what exactly is the problem? Why are we having these classes? Why are we discussing these issues? What's the point? And for me, one way of addressing that is to say, well, there's a problem. And the follow-up question then is, well, what is the problem? So one of the problems I'd like you to keep thinking about in this class and even after this class ends, and that is, how are we going to survive as a Muslim Ummah with all the challenges that are facing us today? There are many challenges, and these challenges are sometimes very difficult. And a lot of times Muslims focus on the physical challenges, such as poverty, such as disease, such as war, such as migration, and these are very true. They are challenges, but also we need to be aware that sometimes it is more critical and, in fact, more far-reaching when we look at the intellectual challenges, the challenge of ideas, because the physical world is changing, but that's not what keeps us thriving or developing insofar or in as much as the world of ideas is what leads us in the right direction or the wrong direction, or to more fruitful and productive activities, or to more destructive and negative activities. And so when we talk about the world of ideas, we're talking about what scholars have written, what we believe is best, and what different types of ideologies are trying to tell us. There are many groups of ideas that are pulling us in different directions and in opposite directions. And depending on what you choose, you can make your life very positive and good. Or if you choose a different idea, you may end up with failure and with deprivation and with a lot of negativity. So that's why we emphasize and re-emphasize the world of ideas. And let me link this to one of the current events that happened recently, and that is in the country of Malaysia. In Malaysia, there is a new prime minister, and the new prime minister that has been elected and affirmed by the King of Malaysia is Anwar Ibrahim. Some of you may have heard the name of Anwar Ibrahim. He is a Muslim, and he is a thinker, and he is an activist. So when he was young, he did not grow up in a rich family. He did not belong to an environment where there was a lot of political power in his family, or economic power, or social power. They were not rich or famous or strong in terms of holding political position. But the parents of Anwar Ibrahim taught him to be a good Muslim, and he rose through his studies and through school and university, and became an Islamic activist. He became an activist. He was a student activist. He was a student leader. He tried to make things better for students and also for non-students. So his initial background is a background of activism. So not just watching what's going on around in the world or simply criticizing it, he tried to do something about it. Now, sometimes he failed, sometimes he succeeded. That's the nature of the world of activism. But it's critical to have, or it was critical for him to have that background to know how important it is to address issues of social change, economic change, political change, in order to make things better for those around him, whether it was initially students or later on the wider society. But he wasn't just an activist. He became later on an intellectual, a thinker, a person who cared about ideas and who wrote about them. I reviewed one of his books called The Asian Renaissance, which talked about why Asians were able to become very successful. But he has also many other books, and he has given speeches, given sermons on Friday prayer, and he has spoken to a wide variety of audiences around the world. And so he wanted to make sure that he didn't just try to make Malaysia better in terms of the physical environment, but also the social environment, the intellectual environment, by, for example, addressing things like corruption, dealing with the countries outside of Malaysia that are trying to influence Malaysian policy, dealing with issues of minorities. Malaysia is a multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious country. So how can Muslims succeed along with non-Muslims in a country that is as diverse as Malaysia? This is an important intellectual and social and economic and political issue. This is one of the many issues he has tried to deal with. He also helped establish the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT, which supports IKI Academy. And so also you will notice many of the people who are teaching at IKI Academy, like myself, have taught in Malaysia or studied in Malaysia. So I taught for 2 years from 2009 to 2011 at the International Islamic University in Malaysia, and had a chance on many occasions before that and during that to meet with Brother Anwar Ibrahim and to have all kinds of discussions with him. He's a very thoughtful and deep thinker. So even when he agrees or disagrees with you, he wants to make sure he understands what you are saying and to address disagreements on the intellectual level and not make them personal. I mentioned IIUM, the International Islamic University in Malaysia, for a reason, because that university is related to Anwar Ibrahim and it's part of his efforts at Islamic leadership. So he's a Muslim and he became a politician, so he became a Muslim leader, but he didn't end it there. He wanted and was and is an Islamic leader. So what's the difference? You can be a Muslim leader by simply being a politician who happens to be Muslim. But if you are an Islamic leader, what is the context of your leadership, the ideas that you use in your leadership, the fundamental principles that are motivating you in your leadership, the solutions you are looking for are related to the Quran and Sunnah. And so this is what makes a Muslim leader an Islamic leader. Now, nobody's perfect and nobody knows Islam 100%. So there are mistakes that are made, but there are also successes. And he, throughout his political career, mashallah, Brother Anwar Ibrahim, from the 80s until today, has tried to introduce the right principles or more successful principles to make the political system more successful. Now, that's different than the idea of an ayatollah or a mullah or a sheikh or a religious scholar being a political leader. That's a different thing. And it becomes a problem when, according to the scholars we are dealing with in this class and many others, when we mix religion and politics. When you mix religion and politics, when you say, for example, that a Muslim country must be led by a so-called Islamic party made up of Islamic party members, this is a problem. It's exclusionary. It tries to take Islam and make it dominate politics by force and not by choice. So what has happened in Iran, for example, since 1979, when the mullahs later on took over the government, when the ayatollahs, and they ruled claiming that they are running an Islamic regime, when in fact they are mixing the role of an ayatollah with the role of a politician, which is very contradictory and doesn't work. It's not to say that an ayatollah should never achieve a political office, but it should not be a party or a group that takes over in the name of religion. It should be based upon merit, upon qualifications, and upon the idea that politics involves compromise and politics involves back and forth discussions, and one should not use the political system to impose some idea of some Islamic order on everybody, whether it's Muslims or non-Muslims. And this notion of imposing morality, especially Islamic morality, through things like the religious police, which has been a problem in Iran or in Afghanistan with the Taliban, has created more problems than solutions. And so the attempt to use Islam to force people into certain behaviors such as prayer or keeping women at home or preventing women from having jobs, this is very problematic and goes against what Anwar Ibrahim has been advocating and those who support him. So on the one hand, Anwar Ibrahim has been opposed to the extremist liberals who want to get rid of Islam, and then the extremist conservatives like the Taliban who want to impose a very restrictive, exclusivist view of Islam. And it's very hard to find a balance between the two. We have spoken before about wasatiyya and the idea of being in the middle, being balanced, that was promoted by Sheikh Taha. But this is exactly what Anwar Ibrahim has been trying to do and is trying to do, at least in Malaysia, and to serve as an example for the Muslim world, to find a healthy balance, to try to not go to the extreme of rejecting Islam or the other extreme of imposing Islam. Islam is a religion as well as a way of life. And so according to people like Anwar Ibrahim, those who are Muslim should be willing to voluntarily follow it. If they don't follow it, it's not the job of the government to force them. And those who are non-Muslim should never be forced into Islam. And he relies on various verses and concepts in the Quran, such as La ikraha fi din, there is no imposition in religion, to make sure that Islam is a force for good rather than a force for evil, and that those who choose to follow Islam are rewarded by their creator, and those who choose not to follow are sinning against their creator, but it's not the job of the government to come and tell them what to do and what not to do. Furthermore, we notice with Brother Anwar Ibrahim is that he is a promoter of Ijtihad. He feels that we cannot rely on taqleed, blind following of previous scholars. We need to constantly renew and rejuvenate Islamic thought. And this is part of Renewal, the renewal of Islamic civilization. Dr. Ismail Farouqi advocated the renewal of Islamic civilization. And Brother Anwar Ibrahim is one of the greatest promoters of this idea. But which Islamic civilization does a person or do people like Al-Farouqi or Anwar Ibrahim want to renew? It is the Islamic civilization that we learn about from Al-Andalus or certain periods in Baghdad or in Africa or in South Asia. An Islamic civilization that is committed to the Quran and Sunnah, but at the same time tolerant, open-minded, non-exclusivist, non-extremist, balanced, following the middle way, and encouraging people to be good without imposing anything on anybody. It is a civilization that focuses on justice, making sure that cases of murder are prosecuted, or stealing or kidnapping, but otherwise leaving people alone. Let this type of Islamic civilization that is moderate and balanced does not interfere in people's lives. Now, some people might say, well, this will lead to fitna, and meaning chaos and confusion and strife and corruption. This is a common claim that is made when there is an advocacy of an Islamic civilization that is open and that is cosmopolitan and that is non-exclusivist. And one way to respond to that is to say that this dichotomy of dictatorship versus chaos is not a new issue in Muslim political thought, especially contemporary Islamic thought. So some people say that Muslims are required by Islam to follow their leaders, even if their leaders are dictators, because the alternative will be chaos. And many times they would consider or lump so-called democratic systems under the label of chaos. And they would make statements like, you see, in democracy, they allow same-sex marriage, or in democracy, they allow abortion, or in democracy, the family falls apart. And so they make these kinds of criticisms to try to convince Muslims that it's okay to follow a dictatorship, it's okay to follow a monarchy, it's okay to follow some so-called Muslim leaders who reject the idea of a representation and shura and bay'ah, which means elections and consultation. So what becomes the concern is chaos is put above the problem of dictatorship. And here we notice a lot of issues that are brought up in this so-called dichotomy, and the forcing of Muslims to have to choose between a terrible regime like the Taliban versus no regime, no government, no central control, which would or is or has resulted in a breakdown of society and politics and economics, and people are in terrible shape on many levels. What the scholars we are looking at, such as Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman and his supporter Anwar Ibrahim, are trying to say in different contexts is certainly chaos is a problem, but dictatorship should never be accepted by any Muslim on any grounds, whether Islamic or otherwise. A dictatorship is unjust, and they refer to things like the example of the pharaohs in the Quran. The Quran is extremely critical of Fir'aun, of the pharaohs in Egypt, and one of the major reasons for that is that they are dictators. They deny the people the people in the case of Pharaoh, the people of Egypt, any role or hardly any role in choosing who their leaders are and choosing who is in charge. So if we are to define dictatorship, so there's a spectrum, okay, between the people choose who is in charge completely, and you have no choice in terms of who is in charge. Okay? The people completely choose the government, one end of the spectrum, and the people prevented completely from choosing the government. So in this spectrum, either you lean toward dictatorship or you lean toward choice, which in Arabic we say bay'ah, making the choice of the leadership, or shura, consultation. So there is a spectrum. And so Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman and Arwan, Allah yarhamu, and also currently Anwar Ibrahim would argue this extreme of dictatorship is wrong, completely wrong, unacceptable, no matter what. It is choice that is the right and the responsibility of Muslims. Now, what happens to chaos? What happens is sometimes a dictatorship breaks down, and until you get a system in place, you will have a period of chaos. So you saw this when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990-91. the Soviet Union was the biggest dictatorship in human history. Humans have created dictatorships throughout their history, whether it was kings or whether it was military leaders or whether it was tribal leaders. And the largest and most terrible dictatorship ever created by human beings in history was the Soviet Union, which later disintegrated in the early 90s. And there are people in this class and in other class at IKI and professors who were who knew this, observed this, who were victims of this, either they or their parents or their grandparents who lived under the Soviet Union, the Soviet dictatorship. The Soviet Union was anti-Islam, was destructive of Islam and Christianity and Judaism and other faiths, and tried to eliminate Islam. You weren't allowed to read the Quran in many cases. Mosques were destroyed or converted into other uses. You weren't allowed to pray, especially in public. There were huge restrictions and efforts by the Soviet Union to deny Islam, to destroy Islam, as well as other faiths. And one of the most horrible decisions that the Soviet Union did was in 1979, it invaded Afghanistan. Now, I know this is a historical kind of detour, but there are events in 1979 that have affected huge numbers of Muslims. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, okay, the rise of Khomeini in Iran, okay, the attempt by Ijtihad to take over the Muslim Ummah and control and beginning by controlling the Kaaba, in 1979, we saw these three events happening one after the other. Now, you might say also there was the beginning of the Iran-Iraq War, although people put that in the year 1980. But let's focus on these three major events: the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the rise of the current Islamic Republic in Iran, the Ayatollahs in 1979, and the attempt by Ijtihad to take over in Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Muslim world in Mecca in 1979. Now, have any of you heard or read about these three events or witnessed these three events? Any of you? Okay. Nevertheless, they have been very impactful, regardless of whether we are told or not. Oh, Brother Rafiq and Brother Muhammad. Yes, would you care to share, if you don't have to, but if you would like to share any thoughts on this? Brother Rafiq, is there anything perhaps you would like to enlighten us with or add to this discussion? Brother Muhammad? Okay, I don't want to impose on anybody, but here is my own perspective, and this is my own commentary. I could be right or wrong. I'm not telling you facts, or I'm adding my opinion to the facts to try to get us to think about these issues, because what I will try to show is they have so many aspects of the kinds of discussions we get into in this class, issues of Ijtihad, Renewal, Modernity, and contemporary Islamic thought. So let me begin with the event that happened and that was indirectly a part of my life. I was in Saudi Arabia when a group of terrorists, Muslim terrorists, so-called Islamic terrorists, tried to take over Saudi Arabia. The leader, his name was Ijtihad. I think this is how you spell it. Jeheman. Okay, so this is a man. In fact, this, according to many scholars, was the precursor to Al-Qaeda. Oh, Brother Muhammad, yes, okay. So what this group tried to do through force, as terrorist groups try to do, is they took over the most important Muslim place on earth. They took over the Kaaba. Now, why would a group of so-called believing Muslims take over the Kaaba? Well, they had political aims. They were against the Saudi government, and they tried to impose their own version of an Islamic Khilafah or so-called Muslim government. It's the same thing that Daesh and ISIS tried to do in Iraq and Syria. The Taliban have done in Afghanistan. Boko Haram trying to do in Nigeria and other places. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you for coming back, Brother Muhammad. Please join in whenever you feel you would like to. So Jeheman and his group, Saudis, who felt, just like later on Bin Laden, that he had the right to decide who is going to lead the Ummah by force. And the way he did it, it was very cowardly and very violently. And that was, he smuggled weapons into the Kaaba, into the Haram al-Makki. He kicked out the Saudi forces, the police and the guards, and he announced, just like al-Baghdadi later on announced in Mosul that he was the head of a new Islamic Khilafah, Jeheman in 1979 announced that he was now the leader of the Muslim Ummah and all Muslims have to follow him. And that is, and he claimed it's because he was the Mahdi, the new Mujaddid of the Muslim Ummah. He was the head of the Ummah by virtue of his, he claimed ancestry to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he said that there's so much corruption and there's so much confusion, fitna, chaos in Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world, and he is the one to solve it by force. So this event, although I was living in Saudi Arabia at the time, I didn't know about it. It was prevented from being announced on the Saudi media. But outsiders knew about it, and the Saudi government tried to stop him, get rid of him. That didn't work. They brought in Jordanian forces. That didn't work. Then they brought in French forces, and the Kaaba was almost destroyed. I mean, the minarets were shelled, and there was a lot of artillery attacks that affected the Haram al-Makki, the place of the Kaaba, the area of the Kaaba, the holy mosque. And finally, Jeheman and his followers were either killed or captured, and then he was later tried and executed by the Saudi government. Now, why do I think that this takeover by Jeheman is of significance for the Muslim Ummah? Well, first of all, it's a precursor to Al-Qaeda. It's the same ideas, essentially, and the same kind of effort that later on Bin Laden did. But what Bin Laden did was he attacked the United States. In Jeheman, he attacked Saudi Arabia. He attacked Mecca. He attacked the holiest place for all Muslims. And so we have to be aware of the fact that there are Muslims in our community, even though they are a minority, they are willing to kill other Muslims and to impose their own version of Islam by force. Any Muslim can say whatever they want, even if they are extremist or liberal or moderates. But when you try to impose it by force, like Jeheman tried to do, and later on Al-Qaeda, and later on, and also the Taliban and Daesh and ISIS and Boko Haram and others, this is what is problematic. And people sometimes don't make that distinction. But on the one hand, there is the view that Muslims believe in free speech. But on the other hand, there's also the view that when we disagree, you should not force me to agree with you, even though you claim you know Islam and have access to the Islamic sources. So we have this terrorist attack on the Kaaba in 1979 by Muslims who claim to be the best followers of Islam. The other thing we have is the revolution in Iran, the so-called Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979. Khomeini comes to power, and later on the Ayatollahs take over the Iranian government. Now, why is this significant for the Muslim Ummah? It is significant for the Muslim Ummah because on the one hand, they achieved something wonderful, which is getting rid of a horrible Muslim dictator. The Shah of Iran was a corrupt, evil tyrant, a modern day equivalent of Pharaoh of Egypt, who was causing both good things and bad things to happen in Iran. But he was killing people, torturing people for their ideas, not because they did any crime. So they overthrew him. And it was not just them, it was regular Iranians, especially the business people, or the so-called bazaris, and regular simple Iranians who were fed up with the tyranny, the dictatorship of the Shah of Iran. So the regime of the Shah in Iran was overthrown in 1979. What the people were hoping for, at least most of the people, is a system in Iran that is based upon bay'ah and shura, meaning democracy, voting, choosing your leaders. But what ended up happening over time is the Ayatollahs took over and gave more power to themselves, and then they turned Iran from a place of political freedom into a place of dictatorship. So they got rid of one dictatorship, but then they started over the years and created another dictatorship. And the results of the horrible practices of that dictatorship, we are seeing today huge, massive protests in Iran. And we hope, inshallah, that these protests will succeed in getting rid of the dictatorship and hopefully bringing a system of political freedom, economic freedom, social freedom for the Iranian people. So that's the second event. The third event is the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which may be, in some senses, the most impactful of these three events. Why? Because what happened was, it's a long history to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and what happened afterwards. And it's definitely something we should all discuss with each other and our families and our friends, because it's a fascinating history. And it continues to impact us today because the result of many, many events has resulted in the so-called international war on terror, which is affecting Muslims all over the world, whether positive or negative. So essentially, in a short summary, I will say the 10-year Soviet invasion of Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989 resulted in a huge, massive change in Afghanistan, and one of that is extreme radicalization. So as a result of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, one of the many terrible results has been the rise of groups like the Taliban. The Taliban are not the only terrorists in Afghanistan and in the Muslim world. There are many groups in Pakistan and Afghanistan that may be characterized as overly extremist and willing to kill other Muslims just because they disagree with them. But the Taliban is the most prominent example. And so this event, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, has led to the rise of a number of so-called Muslim or Islamic terrorist groups, which have led to events that have caused, whether rightly or wrongly, a huge war on terror around the world, which is mostly focused on Muslim groups and Muslim countries. So Muslims are the major victims of the so-called Muslim terrorist groups, but it is these Muslim terrorist groups that are victimizers and that violate Islam, in the opinion of the scholars we're looking at, especially Dr. Al-Hamid Abu Sulaiman and Brother Anwar Ibrahim. And so we are in an age where, on the one hand, there's amazing technological advances. We can have classes through Zoom and through Google Meet, and we can learn from each other across thousands of miles. and many other advances such as the smartphones. But at the same time, we are dealing with a massive international multi-trillion-dollar phenomenon of the so-called war on terror. And so Muslims are suffering from both ends. Muslims are suffering from the victimizers, the terrorist groups themselves, and Muslims are suffering from the response to these terrorist groups. And we may continue suffering for many, many years. We don't know when this problem will end. We hope it will end soon, but I don't know. I hope, hopefully as a result of your efforts and efforts similar to yours, we can work toward or help the efforts to find a solution. For Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, the solution is to continue to encourage Muslims to try to find a political system based on freedom, but without using force or violence to get it. In other words, if I'm a Muslim, I could resort to force and violence and killing and torture to try to get a different political system. Or I can say, no matter what political system I want, I will never hurt or harm anybody. And this is the view of Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. No matter how much the evil dictators, the tyrants, the monarchs, the military rulers try to hurt you, you should never imitate them. You should never do the same thing to you. You should never do the same thing to them that they are willing to do to you, no matter what happens. Muslims must be willing to be courageous and to die for the right ideas. And this is clearly shown in the Quran and in the Hadith, particularly the Hadith, which talks about speaking the truth in front of tyrants, regardless of the consequences. And then again, we go back to Musa alayhi salam. If you remember, he went up to Pharaoh, the biggest tyrant at that time, and he said, "You are wrong, Pharaoh, you are wrong. You are enslaving people, and this is wrong." And he could have been slaughtered, tortured, destroyed in so many different ways. But Musa showed us the example of courage. Musa and his brother Harun went up to the dictator and spoke the truth, their understanding of what should be correctly done. And so why does the Quran spend so much time telling the story of Fir'aun and Musa? Because partially it is a lesson for us. Dictators are bad, no matter who they are. Even if they are the best believing Muslims, dictatorship is bad. You should never start a dictatorship, and you should never support a dictatorship. And if there is a dictatorship, you should do everything possible to get rid of this dictatorship, to change it without using violence. Musa alayhi salam never threatened Fir'aun with cutting off his head or killing and torturing his family. He said, "I am here to bring you the truth, but I cannot force you to follow the truth." Let me wrap up our discussions in class today by focusing on the relationship between Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman and Anwar Ibrahim. Anwar Ibrahim realized that Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman was a true genius and a true thinker and a great social scientist and a wonderful human being. And so he asked Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman to become the rector of the International Islamic University in Malaysia in 1988. And alhamdulillah, he was able to stay rector for 10 years. And Brother Anwar Ibrahim asked Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman to make the International Islamic University in Malaysia to be a model, not just to be another university, but to be unique and innovative and amazing and a true model. And that is exactly what Dr. Abdul Hamid did. And one of his greatest legacies is, so first of all, he made sure that every student that entered the university knew Arabic and English. So the university is bilingual. You have to know Arabic and English to be a student at this university. So you finish secondary school, and then you go to 2 years language training. Then you enter the university for 3 years. So language was incredibly important for Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman. He chose Arabic because it is the connection to Islamic civilization and our Islamic heritage, and he chose English because it is the language of the modern world. We didn't choose English to be the language of the modern world. We may not like the fact that English is the language of the modern world, but it's a fact we have to deal with. And Dr. Abdul Hamid felt the way to deal with it was to learn it, to master it, and then at the same time to promote the language of Arabic so that we can pave the way for reviving Islamic civilization. Another huge accomplishment of Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman at the International Islamic University in Malaysia is he created something called the College of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences. KIRHS, Kuliya of Islamic Revealed Knowledge and Human Sciences. He took the classical Islamic sciences and the modern social sciences and said these are part of one college, not separate colleges. And any student who majors in the classical Islamic sciences must have a minor in the modern social sciences. And if you major in the modern social sciences, you have to have a minor in the classical Islamic sciences. So it is a way of bringing the Islamic heritage and the modern heritage together. Integration of knowledge. At that time, they called it Islamization of knowledge. Then it became Islamicization of knowledge. Now they're calling it integration of knowledge. What you call it doesn't matter. The principle is you successfully and rationally and intelligently bring together both, not excluding one or the other. The extreme modernists would say, yes, the social sciences are important. The Islamic sciences are irrelevant. They're old. They passed their usefulness. There's no need for them. So this would be the radical modernist view. But the radical Islamist view is we need only the Islamic traditional sciences and forget about these modern social sciences. So both are radical views that are, in the opinion of our scholars, against wasatiyah, against balance, and extremist views that will not help us. They exist throughout the ummah, and there are many people that may promote these one extreme or the other, but this is a misguided approach, according to them, and according to myself as well. And I taught for 2 years at the International Islamic University in Malaysia in the Sociology and Anthropology department, and this is what we were trying to achieve. Now, I'm not saying there was a complete success. There are many difficulties and failures and things that were done right and things that were done wrong, both at that time and today. But this is the idea. This is the principle. How do you solve the problem of Islamic civilization today? We are the weakest. We are the most backward. We are the poorest. We are the most uneducated people on earth. This is how you do it, through the model like Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman showed at the International Islamic University in Malaysia. Another thing I want to end with in terms of our class today is to point out that we have politics, economics, and sociology. All of them are important social sciences. The takeover by the terrorist Ijtihad of Mecca in 1979 is a political event and a social event, a religious event. The change in regime in Iran in 1979 and the coming of Khomeini is a political event and a social event. And the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 is a political event and a social event. So these are all events that we need to understand and clarify. And the best way to do that is to have some understanding of the modern social sciences, of the what are so-called Western social sciences or European social sciences, whatever you want to call them. Social sciences exist around the world, but they have mostly been developed in North America and Europe. That's just a fact. It used to be that Al-Andalus was the most advanced civilization on earth, and it used to be the Abbasids in Baghdad that were the most advanced. It used to be the Mughal Islamic Empire in India that was most advanced. Mansa Musa in Africa, the Mali Empire in Africa, the Songhai Empire in Africa, the Ottoman Empire. All these were great Islamic civilization, examples of Islamic civilization. We are trying at IKI to give you the tools and the ideas and the ability to revive Islamic civilization if you want to. We assume that's why you are here. But we are not telling you it's easy, and we are not telling you it's quick, and we are not telling you it's cheap. Anything bad is quick, easy, cheap. Anything good is going to take time, money, and effort. Whether we like that or not, this is one of the rules that Allah has put in place, our Creator has put in place on earth. This is the human condition. We like it, we don't like it, that's a separate discussion, but this is the facts. If you want to bring up a successful family, if you want to be good in business, if you want to have a great government, it's going to be expensive and time-consuming and a lot of effort. If you are willing to do that, IKI is going to support you. IKI Academy is here to help you. IKI Academy wants to provide you with what you need and what you want. If you feel that something that IKI Academy is doing is wasting your time or useless, fine, say that so that we can improve. If you feel something is helping you and supporting you and expanding your knowledge and enabling you to go on the path of renewing, reviving Islamic civilization, wonderful. Please share that with us and we will try to build on that. This is what I would like to say. If there's any comment or thoughts or responses, we would love to hear from you. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Inshallah, I want to see the draft of your research paper. And again, I want to get your responses to this class and the ideas of this class and to IKI Academy as well. May Allah bless you. Thank you very much. Jazakumullahu khairan kathiran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
جزاك الله.